look over my shoulder today at the studio, and what I'm going to be doing is creating a little habitat for one of these squids. I was in a squid mood, so I made a bunch of these little squidlets. And I like making a sort of epoxy clay ring covered with interesting decorative bits, and then filling it with resin water so one of these little squidlets can live in the middle of it. So I thought that's what I would do today, because it's kind of one of my favorite things to do. So I'm going to use epoxy clay, because then I can stick all these shell bits. I've got a bunch of shell bits. I'm here on Maui, which is where I'm living at the moment, and I go down to the ocean, and I've got this perfect little spot where fun bits wash up. So I get to find those choice little bits, and I'm going to put them in as kind of little treasures. All right, so I'm gloved up, and today I'm going to be using Apoxie Sculpt. It is my preference. I really enjoy that epoxy clay. It's just fantastic, and I'm working on a silicone mat that I also got from the people who make Apoxie Sculpt, which is Avies. They have a big silicone mat that's just fantastic, and I chop mine all up into little bits so that I can use them as the non-stick surface for my piece. So what I'm just doing is I'm using a spoon to scoop out some epoxy clay, and I tend to always make a little more than I need, because sometimes you got to add stuff, and then I have things that I do with those extra bits when I'm all done. And I'm going to use a black background because I like how it looks. So I got one ball of the hardener, and now I'm going to try to make one of a similar size of the color, and obviously this is the black, which is what I'm going to use. I'm going to mix my epoxy clay. Love this stuff because it's just great stuff. And I use gloves I got from the Avies website as well, but they're just like nitrile type vinyl gloves. And I'm mixing it thoroughly. I have about an hour good work time where it's soft and sticky enough for everything to grab, so I'm not too worried about that. And I've got a second little silicone sheet because, like I said, I always get a little extra, and I put that off to the side. I'm going to take what I've got here and just kind of form it into a ring, a little donut, because that's how I like his little world to be. So there's just kind of a little window into his aquatic life. And I want to make sure that that's big enough for one of my dudes. And these are sort of wall pieces. I mean, I think you could turn it into a brooch or a pendant if you wanted to, but I kind of like them as little wall bits. Now, it won't stick to this silicone sheet. It grabs it, which is great. So while I'm working, it stays put. But once it's dry, it will pop right off. And I do like an irregular shape. Okay, I think any one of the squidlets can live in there. So now gloves can come off. And one of the things I was toying with, I'm using Hawaiian shells, and the abalone is not a Hawaiian shell, but I almost thought that might be kind of fun, so he can have his own like little cave that he lives in. So I'm kind of thinking I'm going to go in that direction for this one. So I'm going to press that in, and this ridge right here is a little sticking straight up, and I want to give it a little bit more support. So I'm just going to put a little bit more epoxy clay on the side. The epoxy clay is a glue type of a clay. It's in the resin family, and it will grab right on. And typically on something like this shell, I would clean it off first to make sure there's not any residue of powders or something else to make it not grab to the epoxy clay. But this is going to end up getting filled with resin to some extent. So I'm not going to worry about that too much, but I am going to put a little bit right here, because that will hold it in as we have some resin. You can see if it starts filling up here, it's going to kind of fall down that spot and leak out. So I'm going to give it just a little bit of a dam there to hold the potential resiny areas later, and get my wet wipe. Once I switch to gloves off, I'm constantly wiping my hands of any residue so I have minimal contact with chemicals. I think that's just a smart way to do. So then here, I can look in my little stash and see if there's another little shell that I want to add, because I kind of like this circular thing we got going. And I can even put something down inside that little hole to continue the look. It's too small. I really love these shells. It's been like a treasure trove to go down there and find nifty things. I love that one, but it won't fit in that space. It's a kind of an extension of mosaic, because I'm doing the same sort of process. I'm filling in spaces with bits. Let's see. Where's the fun part of this? There's a spiral there. What about that? You see, I'm just shoving it in. That's all you got to do. Now, that's a fragile little shell, but I'm going to end up kind of covering it with the resin as well to make sure it doesn't get hurt. All right, I've got a tiny, tiny little shell here. Let's put that one right in there. I like the little details because then it's sort of this joy of discovery, as somebody would kind of look it all over and say, ooh, look at that, and look at that, and look at this. I love it. Shells are fragile, so I'm always trying to make sure that there's epoxy clay all around, so that if I put in something like this, see how this little bit sticks out? That's a prime area to get broken. And somebody would be really sad if they got this and they got home and they banged the edge and that little piece broke off. So I'm going to make sure it's supported. And then these are little Apoxie shells that are kind of a limpet, and I frickin' love them. I'm just going to put a couple there and kind of play with them here. Got a few. Oftentimes I'll put a little bit of epoxy clay inside the top, inside them, so that again you don't have that empty space, because the empty space is what can get smashed, as we just said. So that kind of helps there. Found a lot of these tiny little oyster shells, which of course echo this nice what's going on with this abalone shell. So I'm going to just kind of stick that in here, have it kind of go down into where the resin's going to be. And let's see if I've got my shoving tool. This is called the Wow It's Awesome tool. And this is one of the several tools from my own product line. I love this tool. It is fantastic. And it will, I'll make some texture with this soon in a minute, and you will see, and you'll be like, wow, that is awesome. And now I don't know which octopus will live in here. We got to have a little guy that can fit in here, but I kind of feel like somebody that can tuck up in might be kind of fun. So I'm going to set him in here just so I can see him as I work and let him dictate how I arrange things. All right, so I think this is going to be nice over here. That's going to fill up a lot of space. And I am rapidly using up that little extra clay I set aside. See why you need it? You just do. So let's tuck that in there and press that in. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to start introducing some beaded elements as well here in a minute. But let me just see if I have any other shell bits that I want. I love all the fragments. So I'm always looking, when I'm on the beach, I'm always looking for things that are just pretty shapes and pretty colors, you know? That's what I'm always excited to find. And once in a while you find like these little things, which is nice. And I love these tiny little bits. Sometimes it's coral, sometimes it's shell, but it's just these little things that are riddled with the holes. I think that's kind of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little bit of coral up here with the beads. Kind of fun to make his little fort here, huh? Okay. So I'm going to put one more thing here, and then I'm going to start building up over here a coral area. Just because I have been into corals lately. imaginary corals. Okay, so this is actual coral bits. And I have shells from all over the place, you know, Australia and just all the different places that I've gone, obviously here in Hawaii. But it's just fun to see. Every place has something different. This is neat. Look at the tiny little cowrie shell this is. I love that. I don't really want it to get lost in the shuffle. So I'm not sure where to put it that it can really be noticed. I might just put it right up here so that it kind of has its own little star attraction thing. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press some sand around in this area and kind of shoving it around. See how it fills in the gaps nicely? And you really have to kind of push it, or else it'll just fall right off. I tend to put my beads into big bead piles based on color, because that's how I use them, and as opposed to keeping them all in their little individual vials. Because see, now I can go and pick and choose between all these different things that are in the same color blend that I want. So the last thing I'm going to do, what I was mentioning to you, is take my tool, my Wow It's Awesome tool, and I am just going to take this and drag it and start creating. I'm going to start here. Let's move this around. Start creating sort of like just patterns. And you can make it very smooth if you like, if you keep wiping that end, which you need to do anyway so it doesn't get this junk on it. But if you keep wiping that end, it will make a much more smooth line. But I am not having a problem with the lines being a little bit rougher. And that's just me. I like it kind of crunchily. But it's definitely about the flow. So it sort of mimics a little bit of wave action. And this is still very wet, so that's why I'm getting this nice crackly stuff. If I wanted to wait a little longer and come back and do these lines when the epoxy clay was more dry, I would get much shallower lines, much shinier lines. And I like that too. Sometimes I do that. But for today, I like it this way. So we're going to do that. Now I'm going to use some pan pastels and just put some color on it. That's something you can do on top of epoxy clay, and the pan pastel powder works especially nice. So I've just got like a little combination of blues, and I'm just going to run it over the surface. Not too much. So I've got a light turquoise and a white blue. And see how that kind of emphasizes the wavy action. And I've got a little darker blue that I'll put down here. And you see how it's kind of gone over the top of that and made it all one color. If I want to, I can come back and drag through it a little bit if I want that black to be more intense, which I will down here, but up there I like it kind of looking foamy, wavy. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right, so this guy's just in here temporarily because I think he looks really good in here. That sort of works. And everything's pressed in good. I let this dry 24 hours and then we'll do the resin. Okay, so the resin is poured in, as you can see, with the little glittery bits added, and now it's ready to take off. I've been careful to leave it on the silicone sheet until the whole process was done so that I wouldn't have any leakage. And it's as simple as just peeling it off. And you see that now it's see-through, or at least translucent. Now, the back side here, you have the texture from the sheet. And you can tell sometimes there's like a little gap or whatever. It depends on what you're going to do with this. If you want this water to be absolutely see-through and not just translucent like this is, all you have to do is pour more resin on the back side. In fact, you could add more epoxy clay back here and build up other layers if you wanted to make it more of a kind of a depth going, going through the whole piece. And just getting it a new coat of resin on here will make it be completely clear, because right now it's got the texture of the silicone sheet back there, which is a slight texture, and that allows this to be sort of translucent, which I kind of like. I think it's kind of fun, translucent, not super clear, because you can see it a little bit better, but you may have other opinions. The other thing I would do is I would have just a little bit of wire up here, a little 20 gauge wire attached with 2 new little balls of epoxy clay and pressed in so that then it could be hung. But there you go. There's your lovely little Treasures of the Sea squid assembly.